of your co-hosts, co-conspirators, and nemesis, Ferris Kennedy. And in the booth to the left of me,
Dr. Ian Clark.
And then in the booth across from us with the big glass window being accosted by our producer, Armando.
Stephen Wheeler.
How's your head, Wheels?
Good. Tight under the earphones.
Yeah, I can imagine. Armando keeps on. Why is he slobbering all over you? It's like really disturbing. I just can't get
He likes salty peanuts. What can I say?
Well, anyways, today, ladies and gentlemen, we actually have done it. We've finally decided to branch out to our own country. Obviously, if you read our bios on our website, I'm the only one that's Canadian born because I have a German next to me and then I have a Norwegian across from me. So this is how the situation goes. But yes, this is part one of the Canadian content. And Dr. Clark and I, alongside with Stephen Wheeler, are ready to educate you on that more than 30% content that most radio stations in Canada want you to play.
It's a lot more than 30%, unfortunately.
A lot more than 30%. So I'm going to leave it to the Reverend to the left of me to guide us into this, and then Wheels and I will chime in and give us our 2 cents. Go ahead, Reverend.
Thank you very, very much. You know, this is special because we are now sitting in this wonderful studio. I see the lights, nighttime lights twinkling ahead of me. And it's beautiful to be here. What a wonderful country. In fact, when you think of Canada, do you think rock and roll? You don't, do you? But when you think of Chuck Berry, you think rock and roll. And therein lays the difference between a defined geographic location and a musically innovative and creative human being. I just thought I'd point that out. Now let's get into it. Okay, our show is something about Canada. Our show is about how rock developed, rock and roll in Canada. And I'm going to develop a case, I'll say, for the prosecution to show that we did contribute in a small way to what is essentially an American art form. So I'm going to start it off with a band you've never heard of. And the band was called the Four Lads. And they were a 4-part harmony band from Toronto, and they had a hit in 1952 with a song called Mockingbird. But the big one was called Moments to Remember in 1955. The reason I bring up this band is not because, you know, they're going to appear at the Whiskey A Go-Go. It's because they're what is known as a transition band. They're a band that kind of marries 2 separate genres. They kind of marry in Perry Como to doo-wop. They're right in between. So if you're interested in rock and roll music and how it grew, this is the type of band you pay attention to. Out of them came Canadian bands like the Crew Cuts. These are all doo-wop bands. The Diamonds, interesting band. They had a huge hit with a song called Little Darlin', which is on the American Graffiti soundtrack. It's a great song. You have time, look it up. And often bands from this period married in a lot of cover work. They had cover versions which weren't released in Canada yet. But where it really began for Canadian rock, whether you like him or not, is with an Ottawa-born kid named Paul Anka. He started big in the late 50s, 57, 58. He was our first teen idol. He went to New York City. He auditioned for ABC Records, and he wrote and sang his hit, Diana. And this brought him instant stardom. And he became one of the first Canadians. He became the first Canadian to have a #1 hit on the U.S. Billboard charts in the rock and roll era. Keep that in mind. It's seminal.
And if you're interested, there's a National Film Board film on that, actually.
There is. They made, when in his prime, the NFB made something called Lonely Boy. It's black and white documentary, and it's touching because he's so young and he's so polite. Rock and roll wasn't rebellious yet. Even the early stuff of Elvis Presley, he's saying, yeah, ma'am. He's saying, yes, sir. He's so damn polite, you can't believe it's anything to do with rock and roll. But these guys, you have to remember, were raised by people out of the 1920s and 30s. It was a different time. Rock and roll hadn't hit the 60s yet, and kind of the counterculture rebellion. They wore suits. They wore ties. At one point, for instance, all the Rolling Stones wore suits and ties. And the Beatles wore suits designed by Pierre Cardin. They're collarless jackets. They're gorgeous things. You can buy them now in specialty shops. They did this because they were transitioning from 50s into 60s. At the end of the 60s, of course, the Beatles would show up in their pajamas with long hair.
Well, they're all drugged up by that time.
Maybe it was Lennon used to hold press conferences in his pajamas
Number
because he
nine. Number nine.
Number 9.
Number 9.
That's a room number.
Yeah, but with Paul Anka, though, in Ottawa, they actually have a street named after him, which is Paul Anka Drive. And at one point in time, isn't that like Little Lebanon for that area of Ottawa? So because I think he's Lebanese descent.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was born in Lebanon or if he was born here. Was he
born here?
He was born here. So he's Lebanese descent.
Yeah.
And that's huge, especially for Ottawa where, multi-diversity with culture all over the place. That's one big stepping stone, especially for that early era of time.
Well, especially in Ottawa, which was really waspian at that time.
Yeah, super waspy.
Very waspy. Big government. It's a government town.
I know.
It's very it was waspy back then. Mm-hmm. Could we even say waspy?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Let's say waspy.
And
I can say that. You can't.
Oh, I can't.
All right.
And then now it's multicultural. So it's great because we're getting a lot of artists actually from Ottawa, which we'll touch base in show number 2. But it's interesting.
Yeah, Paul Anka was freakish because he seemed to have so much going against him almost, but he had a raw talent, and he looked the part. He was a good singer. And he was very polite. If you watch that documentary, Lonely Boy, he's talking, for instance, I think to the owner of one of the big clubs in New York, and he's really bending over backwards. Within 10 years, even less than that, that whole attitude would change. When you get into the mid-'60s, even the mid-'60s, especially the late '60s, bands did not respect, in quotes, the establishment. It just didn't work that way. And that had to do with, of course, the explosion of the baby boomers and everything else. But let's go back to Paul Anka. Most Canadians with successful recording careers in the 50s moved to the U.S. And, of course, that's where Paul Anka moved. And he ended up in Las Vegas, and he called that his home. And what often happens, they used to call it Big Fish, Little Pond. Some U.S. acts would come to Canada because they weren't really making big strikes down in the States, be it in acting or be it in rock, be it in whatever. And one of the guys that came north at that time was from Arkansas, and his name was Ronnie Hawkins. And he was born in Arkansas, and he came here in about 58. He's an interesting cat, really not for what I'd call raw talent, but for the guys that backed him. I don't know if I can talk a bit about. There's this guy in film production in the West Coast named Roger Corman. Roger Corman made a series of B pictures, but the guys that he moved towards stardom, people like Peter Fonda, Jack Nicholson, Bruce Stern, whoever. He's one of those guys that's famous in a tangential way because of people he helped, not for his own talent. And when I think of Ronnie Hawkins, I think of him like that. And he had some hits back then. He formed a backing band called the Hawks. And out of the Hawks came the band, right, with Garth Hudson and Robbie Robertson and Levon Helm and all these guys. They left Hawkins in '65. They became Bob Dylan's backing band in '66. Pretty good gig. And then in '68, they struck out on their own, and they recorded 1, 2, 3, almost in a row, classic albums.
Interesting with Ronnie Hawkins, because when you said you thought of Ronnie Hawkins in one way,
yeah.
When I hear Ronnie Hawkins, I think of Beverly D'Angelo.
Why would you think that?
Well, because the late great Earl McRae, I used to work with his son,
right?
And Ronnie Hawkins, and apparently Ronnie Hawkins and Beverly D'Angelo,
What?
Yes, they had like
a
thing. I guess they were like close. I'm kind of jealous because I've always had a crush on her as a child. For you listeners out there, she plays Ellen Griswold on all the national.
The same woman,
the same gorgeous Italian lady who married Al Pacino and had his twin babies.
Yes, with Ronnie Hawkins,
the Hawk.
The Hawk's a bottom feeder. I just got to come out and say it. So you mean she could have raised the bar? Ronnie Hawkins.
Yes, the Hawk.
This really threw my rhythm right now. I really can't. It's hard for me to,
What?
I mean, to hold those two together in my mind simultaneously is Jekyll and Hyde-ish. It's terrifying. and I need a really fresh breath of air. I gotta go, guys. And if you can just kind of hold the phone, so to speak, Beverly Angelo and Ronnie Hawkins.
Beverly Angelo.
Okay.
Ellen Griswold.
Beauty and the Beast. It's too much.
She's hot.
It's just, yeah.
She still is hot-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would.
It doesn't make any sense, though.
I would date her, absolutely.
Can anybody get there? Okay, I'm out. I've peaked. I'm sorry, it's early in the gig, but I should walk around the block and maybe kick a puppy or something because it's too much. I'm out. Beverly Angelo and Rompin' Ronnie Hawkins.
Yeah, the Hawk.
No way. There's no effort. I'm out. Toast. Bye. Adios.
That's the first time I've ever seen the Reverend leave.
It's the first time I've ever seen him mad.
Wow, he really hit that bottle of scotch pretty quick. Wow. Did you see that? He just downed the bottle of scotch.
Actually, I'm
He's downing
seeing
it.
I'm seeing a crate in the corner. I didn't notice that.
Do you think he's just upset that he could have had a chance and didn't jump on it back in the day?
It could be.
I don't know what to say, man. I feel bad for the guy just because he is smart. He's very knowledgeable. And this is just fact information that I got from a coworker that I used to work with at the time. His father was the writer for the Ottawa Sun, late great Earl McRae, had his own blog, and he, as a kid, my buddy Neil met Hawkins and Beverly D'Angelo. I was like, oh, in the hall when he told me this. And he told me this like in the late '90s, when I worked with him downtown. So this is like interesting. I'm disappointed that. I think he's back.
Oh, he's probably kicked that puppy.
Had a few drinks of water, so to speak. Okay.
Ian, that
Yeah.
bottle of scotch went down very,
Well, it's
very
30
fast.
years. 30 years old. It better.
You okay?
I'm okay now. You know what occurred to me? I probably owe the Hawk a bit of an apology because he's still alive and well. I think he's 114. He lives in Peterborough, Ontario. It's just hard when you hear something like that, because you have these kind of two divergent. Anyway, out of respect for the Hawk, what we're going to do now.
Wait, would you have preferred me saying Taylor Hawkins, the drummer
Wow,
from Foo Fighters?
that would have been more cool because he's kind of a cool-looking guy with a cool band, and like Dave Grohl, he can shake his head a lot with his hair when he sings. If you put Dave Grohl in a neck brace, his career would be over. But we'll get back to that. That's another show. That's our neck brace show.
Okay, so if I would have said to you about 3 minutes ago that Taylor Hawkins and Beverly D'Angelo hooked up, how would you have reacted to that one?
I'd be okay with that because I can see the Mrs. Griswold with Taylor beside her in the car and that station wagon going through the desert, sure, and her singing, and that's fine. But Rompin' Ronnie Hawkins, here's some trivia. In 1969, Rompin' Ronnie Hawkins had Yoko Ono and I guess her husband John Lennon at their farm in Mr. Mississauga, and there's a picture of John Lennon on a snowmobile. It's so bizarre to see it. I mean, he was still with the Beatles, I think, in '69.
Ian, you got to fix your hair. You got this alfalfa thing going there. This, for all our listeners, this Hawkins thing has really distraught him.
How do you alfalfa? How old are you?
He's an old soul.
Alfalfa was like 1943 or something.
Buckwheat.
Actually, 1930s.
There you go.
Rompin' Ronnie Hawkins.
Okay, sorry, I didn't we were dating. I'll put my hair down.
There.
Jesus.
At least you have hair. I got Wheels using the carpet as half of his rug. I'm going to my barber saying, give me whatever you have left. This is it.
Okay. All right, Mayor, there we go. This is a homage to Ronnie Hawkins. I feel bad. Hawk, I know you're out there. God bless you. You've given a lot of people a lot of chances. So in keeping with Ronnie Hawkins, there's a sidebar to this, and the sidebar is a band called Crowbar. There you go. And they're around in 1970, and they were actually Ronnie Hawkins' backup band. This is what I mean. This guy is an interesting cat because he gave a lot of people careers. And the way they got their name was he fired them, and he said, quote, "You guys are so crazy that you could F up a crowbar in 3 seconds." Must be a Southern thing, but... So they thought, Crowbar, and they got their name, and they had a huge hit with a song called "Oh, What a Feeling, What a Rush." That was their hit. Okay, so let's creep into the 1960s. There was a quartet out of Montreal called the Beaumonts, and they had a huge hit with a song called "Clap Your Hands." Clap your hands, that's it. But in rhythm, you got like two or three beats to the bar. As I said, that's sort of gospel feel to that.
It's I kind of felt like it was with the congregation on that.
Yeah,
Like,
clap your hands, clap your hands.
oh, hallelujah!
What a rush!
Anybody on the band? Like, if I would have told you, I want to get back to Hawkins and
You're
D'Angelo.
obsessed to it. Like,
if
I'm over it now.
What if I told you that he
I'm
was with
sedated.
Suzanne Summers?
That would actually make sense.
Yeah, see, that'd be okay in a weird way.
Why? She's another one that's just like aged quite well.
Well,
Yeah, but she's insane.
yeah, she doesn't. She's just kind of this personality from the '70s thingy, like the tie-in there. Suzanne Summers married a guy named Alan Hamill. He used to have a show on CBC called Razzle Dazzle. Everything ties it in this show, folks.
You're just upset that Beverly D'Angelo rejected you.
Clap your hands, clap your hands. I didn't know that, and it was really, really disheartening.
Yeah,
But,
well, hey, you try being a kid in the 80s growing up looking up to three people, Rocky, Dan Marino, and Beverly D'Angelo.
Dan Marino, really?
Well, yeah, I'm a Dolphins fan. I'm not
Oh,
gonna
wow.
lie. Yeah,
That's
of course.
cool.
Hey, if you don't read my profile, what do you think I lived my whole life? Jesus.
Dan Marino.
Yeah, this one here, born in Leipzig, Germany, to a debauched Austrian father. And what is it? An unstable American mother?
Yes.
You just insulted your poor mother.
She's not here anymore to rebel, but I'm being kind. Someday I'll go in and tell you about my nights in Cortez.
At least mine brings a Canadian content where it says, born in Quebec City, Canada, to American parents. Father was a professor at Florida State University.
Boring. No.
How's that boring?
Come on, clap your hands, clap your hands.
I got to see some good football, my friend.
Miami Dolphins, sure.
How does this show go from Canadian music to American football, really?
Because it's gridiron. All right, go ahead. Clap your hands,
Okay,
Mr. Beaumont.
I'm going to crowbar you guys back.
Wheels, why is Armando still licking your head?
It's
Told you he likes salty
it's
peanuts.
Salt. It's insane.
You're sweating profusely.
Well, it's about 95 degrees in here.
Put a shirt on for crying out loud.
Why are you rubbing baby oil on
What
your
is
chest?
wrong with
What's
you? You
that
guys
about?
are something else, man. Both you need help, literally.
Professional. Okay, with that in mind, let's talk about Bobby Curtola from Port Arthur, Ontario. I know,
Good
Thunder
Italian
Bay.
guy. Good Italian guy.
They changed it. He had some big hits, Hand in Hand with You in 1960, and he had a big hit in 1962 called Fortune Teller. Look it up. That is a great song, Bobby Curtola. In 1966, he won what was called an RPM Gold Leaf Award, which were in effect the first Juno Awards. I'll get back to this, for being the first Canadian to have a gold album. There you go, Bobby Curtola, 1966. By the way, the Chum, C-H-U-M, Chum chart debuted in May of 1957 under the name Chum's Weekly Hit Parade. I can vaguely remember these because they ran a long time. They ran to 86. And they were kind of the Bible for the top 40 in Canada. And it's really fun. If you go back to about 1958, you'll see names like Perry Como and Patty Page. And then they sneak in these names, people like Elvis Presley on the same list. You go, uh-oh, I can see what's coming here. Within 5 or 6 years, you got people like, I don't know, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, bye-bye Patty Page.
So the Patty Page didn't last too long.
Well, she was squeezed out by people like the Beatles. Yeah.
Well, sorry, Patty. I know it's a Canadian content show, but if I could, I don't know, adopt the Beatles to being Canadian and have, well, that's not very nice, Sir Paul McCartney come here. Well, yeah, I'll take him.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
And that was Bobby Curtola. Let's stay in the 60s. Okay, 1960s. CBC Television produced a lot of shows that made stars out of the participants. Gordon Lightfoot, Anne Murray, but I won't get too much. But in the 60s...
Anne Murray, Miss No Rhythm. Jesus, you ever see her on stage? My mother used to be, oh my God, she'd be like this.
With his radio, so I'll have to describe his head. He's moving from side to side, kind of very slowly, in a Frankensteinian way.
Yeah, see, at least Celine Dion would do this.
Celine Dion, she thumps her chest.
I was going to say,
Oh, I think she's going to break her rib cage.
Hey, I have a crush on Celine Dion, all right? Leave me
Lord
alone.
help. That's up there with Beverly D'Angelo and what's his name, Hawk?
The Hawk!
Clap your hands, clap your...
Okay, if you know what, we're going to start the rumor that actually Beverly D'Angelo and Taylor Hawkins. Okay, because Taylor is younger, better looking, probably more talented than Ronnie Hawkins.
Probably.
All right, and he's, I don't know, his band is still going, 30 years strong.
That's true.
And he was introduced by Alanis, so there's your Canadian content, okay? Well, it's true. She introduced him to Dave.
so we're in the 60s.
Okay, we're in the 60s. so
Hawkins wasn't born yet. Taylor.
we got Gordon Lightfoot, Joni Mitchell, Leonard Cohen, Denny Doherty he's from Halifax, so the Mamas and Papas. Okay, here's some sidebar trivia. Denny Doherty was in the same band as John Sebastian.
Bach?
Huh?
John Sebastian Bach. Well, that's the heavy metal guy, right, Wheels?
John Sebastian Bach is not the heavy metal guy.
Wait, which is the one I'm talking about, the heavy metal guy?
Well, he's Bach, but he's not Johann Sebastian Bach.
Thank you.
That's a classical composer.
No.
You're a few hundred years early there.
No, the heavy metal guy.
Sebastian Bach.
Thank you.
Not Johann.
Holy jeez. Creeping, babbling Jesus.
I need a breather.
Get him out of here. You're out by 300 years.
I think he hid that whiskey before you did.
Oh my God, what happens? It's so sad when, anyway, people drink too much. The guy you're talking about is actually from Peterborough, I believe, the heavy metal guy.
Yeah.
And I believe J.S. actually wrote for Glenn Gould. He had a contract with Glenn Gould. So,
Canadian content again.
it all ties in. So let me go back. We're talking with Denny Doherty. He was in a band with John Sebastian and a guy named Zelianovsky called the Mugwumps. And they later were the nucleus of the Lovin' Spoonful. Hot Down Summer in the City, the great band from the mid to late 60s. John Sebastian appeared at Woodstock, as you know, listeners. Also in the Mugwumps was a woman named Cass Elliot. So, of course, Cass Elliot and Doherty would get together and form one half of Mamas and Papas. So that's some sidebar trivia for you there. Also in the 60s, David Clayton Thomas of Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Andy Kim. Oh, here's some really interesting trivia. Andy Kim co-wrote the song Sugar, Sugar for the fictional group
The Archies.
The Archies. He sang on the song. And, okay, this is disturbing, but that was a number one hit in 1969. So you think of 69, now the amazing music, Sugar, Sugar, yeah, that was a number one hit.
Sugar,
Well,
By the way,
it's probably due to the fact that it was available in cereal boxes where basically
Yes.
the records were made out of the cardboard of the cereal box and you just put that on your
It
turntable.
was incredible how you'd ruin your father's stereo.
So, by the way, sound engineer Mark, I was in agreement with him, laughing. I think people in the other hallway took October 17th way too seriously. So, by the way, Mark wanted me to tell you regarding the Beverly D'Angelo thing, and he'll get you later.
Okay. He owes me $5 anyway for something.
So we're in 69.
Okay. So 2/5 of Steppenwolf were Canadian too. There's this myth that they're mostly Canadian. I did my research, 2/5. But I'm going to add some trivia here about Steppenwolf, because this always blows me away. I'm going to tell you about a guy named Mars Bonfire, actual name. And he's the guy that wrote Born to be Wild for Steppenwolf. Now, he was born Dennis McCrohan. He and his brother Jerry changed their surnames to Edmonton in the early 1960s, although they were both born in Oshawa. So I don't know what's up with these guys.
You don't want to go by Oshawa as a last name?
I don't know, like Bonds, Oshawa. Anyway, the brothers were part of a band called the Sparrows, which used to play in the Yorkville area in Toronto, and they morphed into Steppenwolf. Their singer, of course, John Kay, was from Germany.
I always laugh when you say that.
Steppenwolf?
No, that the singer's from Germany.
Hot down, yo. In fact,
I don't
if you hear John Kay interviewed, he says that slight accent with the German. Yeah.
Just because when we talk about it, and I said to you, I said, Ian, I said, the Canadian or American? And you're like, oh, the singer's German. It's just like,
I know.
And that's just, I'm like, what's not the question I asked? But did he have Canadian citizenship? That's my question.
Wow, that's a great trivia question. He was a refugee with his mother. I don't know if he did or not. I'm going to assume so, but I don't know.
Because Canada was pretty liberated. It was
Oh,
kind of
sure.
It was
Oh, yeah.
liberated back then. Now it's a little bit tighter.
No,
but back
yeah.
then it was pretty
Right,
liberated.
you'd walk in with a cigarette and just sign something and get,
Yeah,
they were
those are the
desperate.
days.
They were desperate. Anyways, let's get back to it. At Mars Bonfire. Anyway, so they were into this. The Sparrows became Steppenwolf. Another member of the Sparrows was a guy named Bruce Palmer. Now, if any of you guys are Neil Young fans, you know a bit
Yes.
about Buffalo Springfield. Bruce Palmer became a member of Buffalo Springfield.
Can you speak like Neil Young again?
I called up Crosby and I called up Nash. I told you recently, I think, that Neil Young's father, a guy named Scott Young, used to write for the Globe. He wrote sports. He got an award back in the late 60s from Good Parenting magazine. Not many people know this, but he got the award for being awarded and recognized as one of the most understanding parents of the time. And during the citation, they said what happened was this story. In the late 50s, early 60s, Neil Young came to his dad, and his father said, Neil, yesterday I asked you what you wanted to do with your life. Have you come up with an answer? And he said, I sure have, Dad. He said, what do you want to do? I want to become a singer. And he said, son, okay, that's great. Thanks, Dad. And of course, as an understanding father, but that comes to you across the table with a voice like that, and you say, yeah, you go for it, instead of saying, listen, what about a teacher, truck driver, anything but a singer, Neil? He did, and he said, you go for it, son. Thanks, Dad. And he became a wonderful singer.
He created grunge.
Basically, he did, unintentionally, he just didn't wash. It was incredible. And anyway, Mars Bonfire. So he changed his name, and he wrote Born to Be Wild.
Like, I get a rush when I hear
Get
that.
your motor running.
Head up on the highway.
Okay, wow.
Looking for adventure.
Okay, I get it.
Whatever comes my way.
Jesus.
The needle just went into red.
I think you sterilized me. Holy Jesus.
Get your motor running.
Actually, that was the first mention of the term heavy metal in a song. Heavy metal. If you listen to it, that's where they got the term for heavy metal music. From that song.
Scrambled eggs. Scrambled.
How I love my scrambled. That's the way the term scrambled eggs was invented. From Paul McCartney invented that term. Before that, they didn't have a word for scrambled eggs. So that was the Steppenwolf from 1968 with Born to Be Wild and Crazy. Just wild.
Wheels, how would you say it in French, by the way?
Né pour être fou, I'm guessing.
Wouldn't that be funny in French to hear that song? There's actually one guy I want to slap. It's a guy that decided to take Colin James's songs 5 long years
Yeah.
and do it in French.
That's it.
Actually, well, it's not just one guy. This was a very common, I don't know for France, but in Quebec in the 60s, basically what they did is they listened to AM radio from the border.
Yeah.
There were these stations that had records that nobody else had, the first ones, or they had a deal with the record distributors in Ontario. So they would hear the songs before everybody else. They would go back to Montreal,
Translate them.
but it had nothing to do half the time with the original song. It's just words that fitted to the music.
This is why I always thought when I was a kid
That's cool.
that FM radio was for French music. Because my aunt, my aunt in Montreal, I have my aunt in Montreal, she would always listen to FM. And as a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, well, all the good stuff was on AM. So I thought FM, I go, why is all the French music always so clear? And I never understood what it was, it was for frequency modulation. Okay, not amplitude. But then at the end of the day, who cares about AM radio anymore? Because is there anything really on AM radio?
Talk.
Sports, yeah, which eventually will probably go to FM anyways. It's all on satellite. But I always thought FM stood for French music. And then I thought AM stood for American music. Does that make sense? No, come on, I'm serious.
It does, yeah.
It makes
It's sad, but cool. Yeah.
No, but does it make sense?
Sweet and
To
sour,
an 80-year-old, to a kid in the 80s, yeah. And maybe to an 80-year-old, too.
You know, it makes a lot of sense.
But Ian, before the record, is Steppenwolf American or Canadian?
2/5 Canadian. Get your motor. Yeah, it was 2/5 Canadian, and they split. There's a great documentary you can check out on Steppenwolf but because they were a band of hard knocks. They were going nowhere fast.
I just wanted you to say, well, the singer's German. That's the answer I was looking for.
No, I'm not going to. I knew you were, so I didn't go there. Born to be Wild was in the Ultimate Biker movie in '69. Something called, what was the name of that really? Oh, yeah, Easy Rider with Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper, because every second word in that movie is man. And if I dare anyone to watch it in its entirety, go, I dare you. If you make it through, email us and let me know your psychological condition.
I recommend they watch The Big Lebowski instead.
Yeah, I mean,
Dude!
no one can really watch Easy Rider anymore. Great soundtrack. The band is on that, actually, with...
Well, pot is legal in Canada now, so I'm guessing it's the perfect condition.
Well, I could see all these Americans.
Okay, right, I should change it.
All the Americans are going to come down now and say, hey, this is awesome. I'm in.
I'm going to have to watch Easy Rider and smoke a joint.
Hey, man, they're after us, man. About that time, a little bit earlier, we had the husband-wife team of Ian and Sylvia, who wrote Four Strong Winds and You Were on My Mind, which had been recorded about 300,000 times by people. Great songs.
Is that a Willie Nelson song? You're always on my mind.
No, it's not. And never, ever interrupt me when
Wait, Willie Nelson?
Willie Nelson should be dragged to a public place. No,
He's still alive.
I barely.
He's part of the 2/4 of the highwaymen are still around. And at one point, I thought Chris Christopherson was Canadian.
Oh, my God.
He's not. He's German.
I think he's from Afghanistan. I'm never sure.
Jesus.
Let's talk about Chad Allen and the Expressions. Chad Allen and the Expressions had a hit with a song put out in Britain in '65, well, a little bit earlier than that, by Johnny Kidd and the Hurricanes, called Shakin' All Over, which was a big, well, it was a minor hit, an interesting hit, or interpretation by The Who on their Live at Leeds album, which is commonly known as the best live album ever recorded. Shakin' All Over had Chad Allen out of Winnipeg had a hit with it in 1965, and around that time they became known as a band called the Guess Who. Let's take. I spoke about
Bar bands?
Well, I can't even say his name is Mars Bonfire.
I thought you were saying bar bands.
I want to change my. I'm inspired now to change my name because Chad Allen's original name was Alan Peter Stanley Cowbell, and I thought, if your name is Cowbell, like I'm thinking Mars Bonfire here, you know your destiny. Cowbell?
This song needs more cowbell.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Will Ferrell's character with Blue Oyster Cult.
Give me some more cowbell.
They're not Canadian.
No.
So they involved at the Guess Who. Guess Who is a really interesting band if you're interested in Canadian rock, because they were the first rock group to have a #1 hit that reached the top of the Canadian singles chart and the Billboard Hot 100 at the same time with American Woman in 1970. And a lot of guys kind of coattailed on them, singer-songwriters. Oh, Stan Rogers, Murray McLaughlin, Bruce Cockburn. There's a bunch of them kind of were ushered in with the Guess Who. They were huge. They were the most successful Canadian rock group of the late 60s and early 70s, and they were this country's first superstars. No question about it. You had this kind of Lennon-McCartney teaming of Randy Bachman and
Burton Cummings.
Yeah. And they sang These Eyes, Laughing, No Time, No Sugar Tonight, American Woman. American Woman was the first song by a Canadian band to hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. This is great history. Bachman left in 1970, and Cummings still cranked the hits out. They had stuff like Share the Land, Albert Flasher, Rain Dance, Clap for the Wolfman, and he left in 1975.
I have that on a compilation album where it's called Bachman Cummings Collection.
Oh, really, eh?
Yeah, I'll burn it for you. Legally. Yeah, no, sorry. I will give you access to my iTunes so you could share the file for yourself. No, but I have the album. And
Come on, say it. You're going to record it on reel-to-reel tape.
yeah, so I'm going to record it on reel-to-reel for you so you could listen to
From
it.
your Ampex machine.
And it's actually, there's about 17 to 21 classic songs on there. And obviously it's got like Burton Cummins solo stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's got Bachman solo stuff, well, BTO. And then it's got the Guess Who. And it's just almost, it's hit after hit after hit. It even has
know.
Susie Q.
I
Susie Q.
know they had a hit on that one.
Well, I don't know if they did a hit on it, but it was a friggin', that's their song?
No. Well, CCR had Susie Q hit.
Oh man, I just like blew this one up. Holy jeez, man! I think
It's because you had Susie Q Donuts before we did the show.
Oh, yes, it's a good place in Ottawa called Susie Q Donuts off of Wellington. Wow, where the hell?
Let's get into the 70s. I want to talk now about the Canadian Radio, Television, Telecommunications Commission, popularly known as the CRTC.
Crick.
And they became a major force of activity around this time. In 1971, the Canadian Content Law was passed with the objective of ensuring Canadian artists weren't overrun by American media outlets, unquote. I have issues with any government intervention in the arts, but that's for another show. As Burton Cummings once said, people listened to us because they liked our music, not because they were forced to. Okay, the Juno Awards began as a reader poll conducted by the Canadian Music Industry magazine called RPM Weekly in December 1964. And they used balloting, and we cut into the Juno Awards. They were named after a guy named Pierre Junot, who was...
The Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Well, yeah, he's the president of CBC, and he was the first president of CRTC.
Yeah, but he was also the Minister of Heritage.
So they're the ones that control whether for Canadian, for whatever music comes in on Canadian airwaves. They're the ones that
No. It's not exactly that. It's that they if you want a radio license, you have to play a certain percentage of music that is made by Canadian artists according to the Maple system.
Okay, well, today, yeah, you can. Okay, you could play more than 30% because you have more than 30%. Back then, you were playing Gordon Lightfoot, every 3 minutes?
You had
No. The argument was we were going to play Anne Murray on the hour, every hour, which was the threat from the radio stations.
Gordon Lightfoot, there's the rumor, asked them to stop playing his music for a while because people weren't coming to his concerts. They were so fatigued, right?
Well, yeah, when you start overplaying, that's the thing, though. And back in the 90s, Wheels, and you remember this. I don't know, Ian, how much radio you listened back into the 90s, because I know you have a lot of music at home. But back in the 90s, they overplayed a ton of friggin' April Wine, Glass Tiger,
No, there's a whole...
I'm just going with those...
Loverboy.
Oh, Loverboy. Like, it's just too much. It's
but it has nothing to do with the system. It has to do with lazy DJs.
I hardly heard enough. I didn't hear enough Bryan Adams on the radio. Okay. Gordon Lightfoot was probably...
Actually, that was because of Bryan Adams. Bryan Adams told the CRDC to put it where the sun don't shine.
Good for him.
I love Bryan Adams.
But he did that to other radio stations as well. So because he was considered American, because other than him, the entire team was American, and he recorded a lot in the States. So
Keith Scott's from Vancouver.
No, yeah, of course, but
No, it's a good point.
according to the Maple system, it was an American song. So, and he told them, well, I'm a Canadian man. It should be considered Canadian music. So it started a big argument in the 80s.
Yeah,
Sure.
he also he told the
remember.
Junos where to go because his song with Sting and Rod Stewart, All for One,
Yeah.
they didn't want to classify it as a Canadian. They put it as international, and that it really upset him because he wrote it.
Yeah, it's just...
And it's basically Bryan Adams featuring.
it shows you what happened when government gets involved in the arts. It just... Give me an example where it worked out really, really well. You can't.
No.
It doesn't. Really well. It's always this bizarre... It's kind of profiling. When you get that going, in rock and roll, really? So, 1975... You had a lot of bands. This is kind of my little time period peaks. I'm starting to end here, but bands like The Bells, they had a cute song. Look up The Bells on YouTube. Kind of a provocative song. Andy Kim, remember Rock Me Gently?
Did he rock me? Yeah, I like him.
From Montreal.
He's Lebanese, eh?
Yeah, Chilliwack from Vancouver, 5-man electrical band, sign everywhere, sign. Lighthouse from Toronto, and the Stampeders from Calgary. Let's really get into a piece of classic Canadian pop from this time, and that is Sweet City Woman by the Stampeders. It just doesn't get better than this if you like pop, classic pop music. We're going to visit the mid-'70s and FM radio. When FM radio came around, it gave everything a new spin. Get it? Songs could now get away from AM radio's 3-minute ceiling. When you listen to old Buddy Holly songs and Dion and the Belmonts and all these guys, most of their songs clock in just over 2 minutes. I don't know if they had a attention deficit back then, what was going on, but it certainly wasn't Layla or American Pie. These guys, you could pack a lot of songs in. Well, FM came around, and you could play the whole side of an album without music interruption at 3 a.m. I think a lot of guys had their microphones to the speakers back then. I know I didn't. No.
To record for free?
Hey.
On your reel-to-reel?
Ampex. No, cassettes were just in then. So a lot of people, a lot of bands benefited from the FM format. Bachman Turner Overdrive. Rush. Boy, did Rush ever benefit.
He just came out with a book, eh?
Who?
Geddy Lee.
Oh, interesting.
I just got the alert on my phone.
Alert. Stop him. He must be stopped.
Yeah, no, he wrote a book about obviously the time with the band and how it's been such a good run, and he's trying to. They were singing it on the radio, and I think they were making fun of the poor guy, but they were just. And I thought of you yesterday when I heard that. I'm like, oh, when I see Ian, I'm going to tell him, and here I am telling you now.
As long as he didn't do one of those recorded books on tape. Wah!
No, hey, give him credit. 3 guys out of Burlington.
You got to give him credit. And I'll talk about them in a second. I want to mention Bachman Turner Overdrive because they got a manager named Bruce Allen, and you can Google him. He's got his own website. He produced Loverboy. He produced Bryan Adams. He produced Dan Murray. And most recently, Michael Bublé, another act I just don't get.
He's a Canadian version of Sinatra?
Maybe.
Or a Canadian Tony Bennett?
Why wouldn't you just get
the
gold standard? Why settle? Anyway, I'm not going to go there.
He's Italian, eh?
Oh, no, that doesn't actually help in this point. Sorry.
Come on, Dean Martino.
Everybody
needs somebody.
Sometime. Okay.
I want to be a singer.
Dad, I made up my career choice. I called up Crosby. That's great, Neil. Off you go. That's wonderful. Thanks, Dad.
I called up Crosby and I called up Nash. I said, hey, can you sell me some hash?
Okay, we're talking about Rush. Whatever you think about Rush, they have 25 gold records and 14 platinum and 3 multi-platinum, making them one of the best-selling rock bands, in the history of the planet. This is measured in 2005, barely behind the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. This is really disturbing news, but apparently it's true. Someone looked it up. If it's not true, gratefully tell me. So that was the rock scene. Continues with Moxie. They had a song called Sail On, Sail Away, Foot in Cold Water, Make Me Do Anything You Want. Triumph, Lay It on the Line. They're a Trooper, We're Here for a Good Time.
They're from Vancouver?
Yeah. And April Wine from Halifax.
Yeah, I thought they were an Ontario band at first, but when I did my research, they are from Nova Scotia.
Sign of the Gypsy Queen. Mm-hmm. Also notable around this time is the folk rocker Gordon Lightfoot had a huge disco hit with the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. It just blew out Studio 54. It's a really heavy... No, I might have the wrong song there. That is one...
It's a depressing song.
Down the big dick they call Get Your Goonie. Yeah, I don't think you really want to play that in anything but a funeral parlor. I don't know what's up with Lightfoot. But a year later, he had another huge disco hit called Play That Funky Music, Lightfoot.
Play that funky music, Lightfoot.
I said, he said, play that funky music, Lightfoot.
Is this the one you're talking about?
Go, 3.
To the big league they call Get Your Goonie.
Like, why the hell would you want to... So, You also had around this time Heart were the beautiful Wilson sisters, Anne and what was her name? Oh, don't fail me now.
Carney?
Courtney. No, it was Anne and